Hi there and welcome to Stock Club. I'm Mike and joining me today is MyWallSt's chief investor, Emmett Savage.
Hey Mike, how you doing? Where are you today? What part of the world are you hiding in?
I'm in Nice at my girlfriend's family's house for a bit, so excuse the background. I'm kind of cooped up in a little side room here.
It's better than a Jackson B. Ritz, isn't it?
Yeah, anything is better than a Jackson beer. It's for recording purposes at very least.
For our seasoned listeners, will know exactly what I'm on about. Mike, we've spoken on the podcast in recent times about cloud-based unified communications, or UCaaS, which is basically a technology that integrates all communication and collaboration tools into a single system. And these tools usually include like voice, video conferencing, instant messaging, email, file sharing, all that kind of stuff. And anyone who is a digital worker will have engaged with multiple tools that do all types of things in order for them to get through the working day. Anyway, everything we use in business is part of a big suite of tools that together, according to the Cavell Group, is something that's going to double in size in Ireland. Our unified communications as a concept is going to double from currently 43% to something like 80-something% in the next 5 years. But anyway, as it happens, yesterday our friends in Vodafone Business Ireland and RingCentral, which is also a New York Stock Exchange listed and leading provider of AI-driven cloud business communications, announced the launch of Vodafone Business UC with RingCentral for organizations of all sizes in Ireland. And this is actually big for business, Mike. I was in with them, we were chatting about it, they're giving me a demonstration, and it is truly powerful. It's a suite of tools that's already available in Italy, Spain, Portugal, Germany, UK, and basically it allows businesses to facilitate seamless communication and collaboration from any device, anywhere, at any time. And with this offering, Vodafone Business Ireland and RingCentral are helping businesses to adapt to, the evolving landscape of hybrid work. We all want to work from wherever we are, whether it's a Jackson B. Ritz or an office in Dublin.
That'd be Vodafone's biggest challenge, is making sure I have good Wi-Fi anywhere I go.
Anyway, so to our listeners, if you've any influence on a business's comms evolution, you just have to have a look at this, because Vodafone Business UC, the UC stands for Unified Communications, with RingCentral, is now available in Ireland for new and existing businesses, Vodafone businesses. And for more information, search Vodafone Business Unified Communications or click the link in the show notes. So that's UC, and it's a big movement, Mike.
I like it. I also like that you're doing the ad read now, so yeah. I don't have to do anything.
By the way, as I mentioned, Anne-Marie and I were in with Vodafone HQ yesterday, which is Tuesday in our world here. This podcast goes live on Thursday, and they basically are, as our listeners have deduced, our exclusive advertising partner, and they're sponsoring 2 more $800 off vouchers to Nexus, which, as I said last week, is our AI and real human intelligence powered services that so far has identified 13 global stocks that I personally believe will be some of the most successful stocks published anywhere in the world this calendar year. So I've invested in some of them, as some of the best investors in the world have invested in some of them, like Chuck Ackrey, for example, of Ackrey Capital Management, is a big shareholder in one of those 13 stocks, and that guy is the Midas touch, and is a close friend of Warren Buffett, and anyway, he's done something spectacular. So we've 2 vouchers sponsored by Vodafone, and when they're gone, that is it. And I think the voucher code is Nexus 800. Does that sound right, Mike?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, anyways, why not?
We'll change it. We'll change it if it's wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Anyway, God, I'm really nailing this ad read stuff. So that's that, Mike. Let's get on with this week's episode.
Yeah, that's great. I just sit back now. I'm not going to do any ad reads from now on. Okay. Oh, before we get into the show, we have to talk about Boeing again. Did you see before we get to did you see another whistleblower died?
You are kidding? No, I did not.
A second whistleblower died.
Now hold on. What did he die of? Like, did he choke in a chicken place where he choked on a chicken bone?
Yeah. Well, look, I don't know.
People die. Let's start with that. But
people do die. But But 2 out of 2 whistleblowers in this Boeing case have died.
Yeah,
you know, I would be looking at the chicken bone if that was the case. A secretly planted chicken bone in the boneless box or something like that.
Yeah,
absolutely nuts. And they've
unreal.
had two planes land without landing gear or something nuts as well. Like, I don't think they were fatal crashes, but it is just all going off. It's absolutely nuts.
Hey, how many whistleblowers are left?
I think there's 10 more now. So
really?
if there's a third, we're really
well. If your job in Bone was to take out the whistleblowers, you take your time. You've only 10 left. You kind of go, right, if I do 2 a month, that's 20 more months of employment. Or sorry, 1 every 2 months. My maths are just don't mind me, folks.
It's awful.
I'm just riffing. Yeah, it is awful. Rest his soul.
All right, we're getting into a wonderful topic on Wall Street. I thought we had this behind us, but that is meme stocks. So Roaring Kitty, aka Keith Gill, who was behind much of the furore around GameStop. You kind of remember the fellow with the headband who kept just saying, I like the stock. He was very much he's very much behind the original thesis behind GameStop. So he kind of did a lot of research, realized these hedge funds were way overshort, and he instigated a lot of it. Obviously it went so far beyond him since, but he is this kind of mythical figure, I suppose, around all of this meme stock craze. And he made a return to Twitter on, was it Sunday? And he didn't post anything. What he basically posted a fella sitting up in his chair. Yeah, so as if, like, I think the game in context is like, oh, I'm taking this seriously now or something like that. So in the words of the Associated Press, GameStop and AMC are surging like it's 2021, all based on a couple of tweets from this fella. So for those that have been living under a rock, could you kind of give a refresher, Emmett, on like what is a meme stock and what kicked all of this off?
It's a fair enough question to start with, because it's easy to forget. Like, I mean, certainly when you're growing up, you don't, just something about the word meme stock, it's very difficult for you to latch on what's going on here. It just feels just so trivial, and funnily it is very trivial, but it actually has high economic impact. But a meme stock refers to a publicly traded stock that gains popularity and experiences a significant move, primarily due to online hype or social media activity, or things that are just unrelated to the fundamental business performance. And the phenomenon is driven by retail investors, that's the people on the street like us, who congregate on platforms like Reddit, Discord, Twitter. Is there anything else?
StockTwits is one.
StockTwits, yeah. So, well, they're characterized by several features that set them apart from, let's just say, traditional stocks, where old-fashioned things matter, like what the company does and how it does it and how well it's doing. You know,
old-fashioned things like revenue and profits.
Yeah, strategy, competitive landscape. Yeah, exactly. All of that stuff goes out the window when you talk about a meme stock. For a start, they're heavily discussed, as I said, on social media forum and communities. Reddit's Wall Street Bets is the big one, and the online hype plays a significant role in their popularity. Memes, videos, and posts about stocks, they generally go viral. They're usually funny. They usually look very cheap, and there's no artistic quality to them, but they have this kind of funny little hook to them, and it fuels interests, and it's sent on to a wider investment audience. And the trading of meme stocks is driven, as I said, by retail investors, usually consisting of a large number of small individuals rather than an institution. It'd be very worrying if Morgan Stanley decided they were going to pile into AMC because they saw, I don't know, a picture of a frog saying something, I don't know. So the collective action leads to extreme volatility with really rapid price increases and decreases. Like, it's a whip chain? Is that the expression? Whip chain movement? Whipsaw, thank you. Change in share price. And additionally, meme stocks usually have a really high level of short interest, which results in a thing which we've discussed in the podcast before called a short squeeze, where stock price rises rapidly, which forces short sellers to cover their positions by buying shares, which has a spiraling effect. And that's effectively meme stock. And the main examples are older listeners more than 2 years around will remember our GameStop, as you mentioned, probably the most famous example of all. And at the time, people just didn't want discs for their PlayStation anymore. Like, the business was going into slow and steady decline because PlayStation or Sony and Xbox by Microsoft allowed you to download games directly from the developers. So GameStop, who sold discs, were in the slow death spiral, but no, not in 2021. Then there was AMC, cinema chain, and then BlackBerry was another example of a meme stock that experienced a real pop during the online hype. I'm sure there's more, but they're the three that jump to mind when I hear meme stock. But that's what a meme stock is, and that's a very, very rough and ready history of the phenomenon.
Yeah, and I think we need to give a bit more context of just how big a story it was at the time. So it was around January 2021, and it's funny if you go on to Keith Gill, Roaring Kitty's Twitter page, he's got a post up from August 2020.
Yeah.
Like kind of bookmarked at the top of his Twitter feed,
Yeah.
which was basically explaining why he believes GameStop can instigate a short squeeze. So it's interesting to see it 6 months before it actually came about.
Yeah.
But that was the number one story on anyone's lips for about a week, 2 weeks time. And there was a real David versus Goliath bit to it too, where it was retail investors, it was people on Reddit, like anyone could have just been sitting there at the right time at the right place, who were literally like not bankrupting, but like they completely closed down Gabe Plotkin's fund, who is one of Citadel's big honchos. He's Ken Griffin's kind of number two for a long time. These huge hedge fund Wall Street types. So it really captured a narrative which people latched onto too, and I think that's a lot of what's behind Roaring Kitty or Keith Gill's. And I think we should just go with Roaring Kitty and just accept the silly name for the rest of this pod. But that's a lot of what's behind his social media activity now as well, is kind of posting all these kind of people over taking over the man and revolutionary kind of videos at the minute. And that was a big part of what gave it such a story and such popularity. And also, people were getting easy money, and easy money always works in whatever context. But I remember at the time, I had never gotten so many WhatsApp messages asking, what the hell is this? Do you know what I mean? With anything in investing. And it's probably, when that's happening, it's probably not a good thing.
Yeah.
When everyone else is like, should I invest in this?
Yeah.
Just say no. I think the only thing that came close to it with anything like this was Bitcoin. It was like I getting random messages, should I invest in Bitcoin? And I'm like, I'm not the person to say that, but probably not. Yeah.
But you're right. It's like there's a blurred boundary, a very large, thick grey line that goes between investing, trading, and just pure gambling. And it's all, I think how deep into that line is dependent on how long your intended holding period is. But when somebody is jumping on to whether it's Dogecoin or AMC, they're not really thinking this is an asset I'm going to leave to my kids in 50 years from now. They're like, I hope I'm out of this in a couple of days and I've made 20-something% or more. It's just different part of the brain is making a different type of decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is gambling. It's pure speculation. And
pure speculation.
For people who are in that world and know what they're getting into, look, more power to you.
Yeah.
Fire away.
Yeah.
This is just your meme coin for the week.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's dragged in, and we saw it at MyWallSt, the amount of signups and everything, and the interest it begot from it. It was drawing in new investors to something like this is a very tough position to start from. But, But yeah. All right. So we've been through kind of Roaring Kitty's re-emergence, we'll say, on social media. We talked about the power of a couple of memes. It added about 6 or 7 billion quid to GameStop's market cap. And we talked about, he went through the original kind of posting around why he thought GameStop could be a short squeeze all the way back in 2020. So what happened since then? So that was on Sunday night. Talk about the last 2 days.
Well, let's just talk about Keith Gill for a minute, because to meme stocks, this guy is to meme stocks what Einstein was to physics, or what Marie Curie was to radioactivity, or what Leonardo da Vinci was to Renaissance polymath. Is that what Leonardo da Vinci supposed? He was to memes what Freddie Mercury was to singing, folks. This is kind of like, I can give no higher compliment. I don't want to live in a world where there's no Keith Gill, Mike. That's the truth. I hope my voice carries the irony and sarcastic lilts, because honestly, this story really does highlight a reason why humankind does not deserve a lot of its freedoms. Like, it just...
That's what happens when you give people the internet.
Anyway, look, to jump back to 2021 before I answer your question, which is what happened since Monday. As I said, GameStop was struggling to survive. They were selling their digital discs, and Keith Gill rocked up and saved the day by influencing all these retail investors to buy GameStop shares and GameStop shares, GameStop shares, and defy all the accepted metrics, as we discussed. And this short squeeze was really a big thing. And as you said, it was such a hot topic. I'm quite sure we had a couple of podcasts out of it. And he became a legend of meme stock investing in 2021. So small investors, for at least a while, were winning the battle, as you said, in the David versus Goliath landscape. So not to, I suppose, over egg the situation, like, in fairness, he has done something that, he is David against Goliath, and he has got a name in the area. Roaring Kitty is how he's known. But if you cut to the opening bell on Monday just gone, as I said, he reignited this phenomenon. GameStop shares more than doubled. I think it closed up 74% on the day, which was the biggest intraday trading jump for GameStop since 2021. So, like, it's back on, folks. Trading in GameStop was halted 8 times before midday due to the extreme volatility. I mean, come on. Other meme stocks like AMC also enjoyed this halo effect and also jumped. I presume it's called the halo effect in this situation. But they also had a jump. And in fairness, the dynamics of the market for companies like GameStop has really changed in 2021. And short positions against GameStop's tradable shares now stand just over 24% down. They're up 24% down, and they're up 140% at the height of the craze back in 2021. So the impact of retail investors on stocks is very real. And by the way, it's very important to mention that Gill reaped a significant profit from investing in GameStop in 2021, and he denied using social media to manipulate stock price during a congressional hearing. And he simply stated, "I like the stock." I mean, what a reduction. I like the stock.
Well, like, in fairness to him, I don't think, and he hasn't been charged with anything, but nothing he did was wrong either.
Yeah.
He simply posted to a board, and this is why I like it, and this is what could happen. And it happened times a million. But, and I remember it happening at the time as well. I don't think he sold his shares at the top at all.
Right, which is the trap.
I think he held on. He held on to some for a long time. But
we've all been there.
I'm sure he's fine.
Yeah, I'm sure he's fine. But anyone who's been a long-term investor can look in the rearview mirror and put a pin on the chart of exactly when they should have sold. And it's human nature to go, "Oh my goodness, it was 5x up from where it is today. Had I sold just then?" It's part of the investing journey, folks. We can't time things very well. And anyone who doesn't tell anyone, because the minute you have a system, it becomes inefficient.
Yeah, so, and then I think the numbers were short sellers lost about £1 billion on Monday and another $1 billion on Tuesday on GameStop, considering the market cap is about 12
nice
billion.
Nice round number, that billion. It's great. You don't want to lose 982 million. It's like, it's a pity we didn't lose another 18 million. We would have made the $1 billion. That's a story for Christmas or Thanksgiving.
And I think yesterday, so Tuesday, when we're recording, both stocks opened up more than 100% up, but they kind of dissipated throughout the day. So it might be losing a small bit of momentum. But there's a lot of theories going around. I read somewhere that someone was saying Ken Griffin from Citadel bought Roaring Kitty's Twitter page and is just posting memes now on his long GameStop. Do you know? There's a few conspiracy theories going around.
Right.
Yeah. But in general, like, it could be a very realistic thing where someone is either hacked his social media or he's sold it off.
Yeah.
Which I think he's entitled to do as well.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I know you can't answer this, but I guess we're talking about is speculation, so you may as well speculate. But what is the future for meme stocks after all this kind of messiness?
I think that's a very interesting question, because the phenomenon, no matter how much we trivialize it or lampoon it or laugh at it, as you said, like what Roaring Kitty did was legal, and the effect was pronounced and it was unmissable. So like that's quite interesting when you think, so how is the meme stock thing gonna evolve? Well, so let's just look at the first principles. It's clear that social media has shaken the stock investing world up, or certainly stock trading as opposed to investing. There's plenty of value for stock investors in social media, but for traders, that's the hot spot. And everyday investors, online communities, and trading rules are all working together. And it's constantly changing, which creates chances and a couple of tricky situations. So to your question, I suppose platforms like Reddit and Twitter, Discord, they'll continue to play significant roles in shaping investor sentiment and market movements. But I think that exchanges might introduce new mechanisms to manage extreme volatility, such as enhanced circuit breakers or more stringent margin requirements. So if exchanges decide to make a move against meme stocks, there are two things that they can do. Also, the SEC in the US, like, they're not ignoring this. They've seen it now twice. And whatever by 2021 came and went, and if it was a phenomenon, a once-off, it probably doesn't require regulatory change. But now that it's reared its roaring kitty head again, I think that there could be a chance that the SEC decides there's stricter rules on short selling, or even, here's a theory, reporting requirements for social media influencers. Like, they can set the rules. If you're publicly commenting on a listed stock, that's one thing, but I wouldn't be surprised if the SEC put in rules that if you've a vested interest in something or in a listed asset, that there needs to be some kind of reporting rules if you're a social media influencer. How they do that, I don't know, because really, as you said, it's a bit of a mad question, but that is something that could happen if we just saw more and more the rise of the crowd, if you like, and changing the dynamics of the market.
Yeah, and I think you're right in saying that this is just another element in modern investing now.
Yeah,
do you know
right.
what I mean? Like, the fact that it's happened and the fact that people have seen other people make money in it, it's going to be repeated in some form, or people are going to try to recreate it in some form.
Yeah.
So it's just something to be aware of. It's going to pop up every now and then, and there's probably, especially GameStop and AMC, because there was so much hype around it.
Yeah.
And I think AMC in particular, because they've really steered into it. Like, they had an at the market offering that finished up on Monday, where they didn't raise it all on Monday, but I assume raised a lot of it, about $250 million. Do you know what I mean? So they're actually making money from it, and they've done a lot of silly stuff, very borderline stuff. I remember they had issued too many shares as part of their 10K, and so they couldn't get a vote through to issue more shares, so they issued these new tokens, and they were all very memey as well. So AMC in particular has really kind of tried to profit off the retail hype, and I think that was one of the kind of main critiques of GameStop at the time, was it really couldn't manage. All this was happening to GameStop the stock, while GameStop the company was still struggling and didn't really make much money off the whole meme stock thing, despite being one of the biggest news stories of the year at the time. So yeah, it's all a bit messy. It's a thing that's going to keep happening, I imagine. I don't think to the scale it originally did. I'm not sure, would you agree? Like the conditions of lockdown and
That's
everyone
true.
with extra money and all the rest kind of made a perfect storm for it in that sense.
That's right. I mean, the velocity of information and the speed of trading from your phone is just now, everything is instant. But when you have everybody lying at home on a couch waiting for a flu to pass, you definitely have a different backdrop.
Yeah.
Right, Mike, let's move on. So that's
so.
The memes. By the way, I cannot remember a single meme other than the one I looked at there before the show with your man Roaring Kitty. I can't remember one of the memes from 2021. Can you?
I don't know if it was about memes in particular. I think it was just that was the name
right.
they got. Do you know what I mean?
So I thought there was shows you how little attention I've paid to it that I didn't even. I thought, wow, it must have started with a meme, but of course it's not. It's the whole pent up the vibe that goes out from the influencers.
Sure, a meme is just an online joke, really. And, the whole thing is a meme in essence. I'm
showing my age here, so I'm going to shut up.
Okay.
Mike, listen, you've got a tribute. You've got a tribute for one of Wall Street's great investors who passed away last weekend. Tell us about Jim Simons.
Yeah, so Jim Simons, aka the man who solved the market, which I think is a great moniker to have.
The man who solved the market.
Yeah, it's a great book worth reading. So he sadly passed away at the weekend at the ripe old age of 86. 86 is probably a good innings considering he chain smoked for about 70 years. Wow. But he's seen by many as the father of quant investing, although I think Ed Thorpe might have an argument for that too. But he's one of, if not the most successful investors Wall Street's ever seen. So depending on what lens you view through, I think Warren Buffett has created more value, but Jim Simons actually delivered better results. So I thought it'd be kind of fitting to give him just a wee tribute on Stock Club. So I mentioned the book, The Man Who Solved the Market, it's this biography on Jim Simons, and I read it years ago. And you know, with investing books, I'm thinking of like Peter Lynch or Chris Mayer, where they're kind of motivating. It's like, this is how you do it. It's very simple. These are these amazing investments, and you just kind of had to do basic enough stuff to find them. Mm-hmm. And you know, it talks about retail investors in particular having all these advantages.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is not that kind of book. The fella, he was an award-winning mathematician. He worked as a NSA code breaker before he got into finance. Just a pure savant, basically. And so for the vast majority of people, they're not going to be able to emulate anything he did at all. It's interesting when we're talking about AI now and machine learning and large language models and stuff. A lot of the early research done on especially language processing ended up in this kind of models, and so much machine learning as well. So what we're talking about, they wouldn't have called it AI at the time, but it was very similar. Mm-hmm. And what essentially, and what people have given him credit for, less so than an investor maybe, was Jim Simons created the best money making machine there ever was. So and there's probably not a lot of investing in it. What essentially he did was apply pure mathematics to Wall Street. And what that resulted in was his hedge fund, Renaissance Technology. Their main fund is called the Medallion Fund. Mm-hmm. And it achieved an annual return of over 62% before fees from 1988 to 2021.
Oh my
when Jim
goodness.
Simons stepped down.
That
62% a year. He had one losing year in 1989, and that was it. So, like, to give some context is that if you were lucky enough to invest $100 in the fund in 1988, it would have been worth 4.2 million by 2021.
Stop! I don't believe it.
Yeah, so truly outlandish returns, and because of that, the fund has been closed off since 1993, which adds a lot of mystique to it. Jim Simons has basically said they couldn't get the returns on a bigger pot of money. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
totally.
If they invested 10 billion, they could get 60% returns. They couldn't get 60% returns on 20 billion because they would move the markets too much. And yeah, you can't invest in the Medallion Fund unless you work at Renaissance from now on, basically.
Wow. So it's a good idea to apply for a job there, I guess.
Yeah, but I think you need to also have a PhD in applied mathematics to get anywhere close.
Not if you're making the team, Mike. Think big.
That'd be the most valuable janitor's job in the world.
Yeah.
So he laid the groundwork for. We're talking about Ken Griffin and Gabe Plotkin and from Citadel. You know, these types of funds, the modern quant fund. Jim Simons and Renaissance were the original groundwork for that. So he did away with any traditional financial metrics. He instead just looks for patterns in data, whatever that might be. In fact, he refused to hire people from Wall Street or any sort of traditional finance. He only hired scientists, mathematicians, engineers, and it just became about data and patterns. But it just ended up being in Wall Street, looking at price action, whatever else.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? So his two proteges, Bob Mercer, who's actually quite a controversial figure, I found out, and Peter Brown, they've come out and said, and that's why no one has been able to copy Renaissance, is because the signals they're looking for were so esoteric that no one could even kind of start to find them, if that makes sense. Even Jim Simon said when he first started out, he was just a fundamentals trader and he was awful. So one day he was genius, the next day he's an idiot, is what he said, which is probably the only relatable part of his story I think we can connect with.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's the first to really create one of these high frequency trading systems that say might give like a 51% advantage to them, and then make 1 million bets a day using said system. Like, so that's quite common now, but he was the first to do it. And like, I think high frequency trading takes up about 1/3 of all trades on Wall Street these days. So his legacy is undeniable. He's a very secretive, mysterious character, which adds to it too, and definitely one worth just giving a shout out to here on the pod. And if you're listening and you're interested, the book is called The Man Who Solved the Market, and it's fascinating.
Nicely done. Nicely done, Mike. I actually was unaware of more or less all of that. So tell me, what did he do with his wealth? Do you have any insight as to how he lived his life? Because clearly this guy was up there with the wealthiest.
Yeah, well, he was chairman of Renaissance until 2021. Right. So he worked up until he was 83.
Yeah.
But he was a huge philanthropist as well. So he and his wife donated. I think they looked to donate the majority of his wealth, and I think he's worth over 30 billion.
Wow.
So
that's great.
Yeah, definitely. Great. I think he's quite political as well. I think he was a big donator to the Democratic Party, which is fitting because his main partner, Bob Mercer, was a huge Republican donor too.
Oh. So
it's interesting that they were both on very opposite sides.
So was it Bob Mercer that you said was a bit of a controversial figure? Is that the word you used?
Yeah, he was one of Trump's first big backers,
right.
And I think he's involved with Steve Bannon. I'm not sure exactly. I didn't get too into it. So
it's political controversy as opposed to private life controversy, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. But it's really interesting. If you are interested in this kind of stuff, it might put you down a bit, because you'll see that there are certain people in investing circles that are just uber geniuses that no one is ever going to be able to compete with. But it is a really interesting story and a really interesting company. So that is Jim Simons and Renaissance Technologies. Okay, big deal or no deal? Big deal or no big deal? Emmett, OpenAI unveiled newest version of its model.
Yeah, that's right. It introduced GPT 4.0 or 4.0. Did I say 4.0 or 4.0? It's 40.
GPT 40. They skipped 36.
Well, yeah. So they released the latest one, and I think it's a big deal. I do think it's honest a big deal. The new model, which is available to all GPT users as of today or yesterday. I was using yesterday. Yeah. It's faster. It can read and discuss images, translate languages, identify emotions from visual expressions. So it accesses the camera on your phone, and you can. I saw a piece yesterday where somebody held up their phone and said to GPT, "What's this?" And they were pointing the phone at two ducks, and the phone, or GPT, basically described the ducks and the breed and how they were swimming in a little pool of water, and it was just remarkably accurate. And
yeah, I actually saw Duolingo stock was down. You're talking about
being
able to
translate.
See
that. I didn't draw a dotted line between those two data points. I observed Duolingo took a hit, and that explains that. Interesting. It's amazing. You just don't see a competitor. It's often you don't see a competitor that just comes up and bites you. And I've been trying to stay very aware of the competitive threat of AI to a lot of stocks at the moment. We've discussed it here in the show a lot. But anyway, despite a few bugs, GPT 4.0, it aims to be the next gen AI assistant similar to enhanced Siri, because we all think Siri is brilliant. So it's a big deal. It's nearly as good as Siri. The first thing you switch off
has
on your
to be
iPhone.
better than Siri.
Yeah, that's the benchmark, folks. It's like, hey Siri, play Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, and then off she goes, and she comes back with Do the Hustle. You're like, no, Siri, stop. Okay, so it's a big deal until the next one, of course, and then the next one will be a bigger deal. What do you think? Do you think it's a big deal?
I think it's all a big deal. Like
Yeah.
everything that OpenAI is doing, Google came out yesterday as well.
Mhm.
It's all a big deal, but it's also like
Short-lived.
I don't know how to describe
It's a
it.
short-lived
Yeah,
big deal.
it's very hype cycly
Yeah, it
while
is.
also being important in just reminding people how fast this technology is
That's
moving.
right.
And there is a very
Yeah.
very legitimate case that this is kind of our internet 2.0.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of hypey stories back in 2000 as well. But think of how much control the internet has taken over our lives in the 20 years since. So two things can be true. You can kind of not pay attention while also not avoiding it.
This is true.
If that makes sense.
If someone told us that this is all we've got for the next 5 years, it's a very big deal. But we don't know when GPT-41 is going to be released. And when it's out, it's going to be better. So we can only get excited for the moment. Right, Mike, there's some very positive changes coming for Irish investors, or there might be anyhow. And so we're going to go for a deal, no big deal for the Irish audience. Tell us about it and tell us it is a big deal or no big deal.
Yeah, well, potentially a very big deal. So, as you said, very positive news story for particularly the Irish investors amongst us, who most of them at least will be very aware of the prohibitive tax laws when it comes to investing in this country. So, the Minister for Finance, Michael McGrath, has come out this week. He said that the government are looking to make changes to the tax law to make it more attractive for people to invest savings. He didn't give any specifics. Obviously, it's kind of just a work in progress at the minute. But he quoted, sorry, I'm quoting here, "We have over 150 billion euro of household deposits in Ireland, and that funding is largely asleep. It's earning little to no return. It is sitting in instant access overnight or current accounts. I'd like to see a significant share of those funds being put to more productive use in the economy, investing in structures that help to fund and support early stage and innovative businesses. People should not be penalized unduly," which I think is very important because we'll get into why they're being penalized, or for trying to put their money to work. I do think that tax has a role to play, and I would anticipate making some changes. So there's a plethora of issues with Ireland's tax system when it comes to investing. I think, and this is my personal view, the deemed disposal rule for ETFs is the worst amongst them, which basically dictates that every 8 years there will be a taxable event, whether you have sold your holdings or not, when it comes to ETFs. So passive investing is essentially I wouldn't say outlawed, but you're taking all the benefits of passive investing away from Irish investors. Imagine the most common thing in America is a country of investors. The vast majority of people either won't really think about it too much, but will constantly invest in something like the S&P 500, forget about it, and in 40 years, there's their lump sum. What Ireland is doing is that every 8 years, it acts as if you've sold your ETF.
Oh, it's horrendous.
Shares. And you pay tax on that. And the tax is 41% as well. So it's completely prohibitive, and it's driven away people from doing this passive investing. And so I would hope that is top of the list in terms of what it'll fix. I don't know what is on the line for them, but there's no rule in my eyes that could promote long-term investing less. And we'll look at other issues as well. There's a complete lack of any investor-friendly vehicles like a Roth IRA, what they have in the US, or an ISA in the UK, which very much promotes people to invest as well. I'd love to see an introduction of one of those. That could be a bit further down the line, but if they are a remedy in the system, there are two very positive and effective vehicles that work in other countries. Why wouldn't they work in Ireland as well? So yeah, and one of the effects, I think, of this, of having no viable investing options, at least from a tax perspective, is that it pushes people into property.
Yeah.
And Ireland is going through a considerable property crisis at the minute.
Yeah.
So you've given people one option to invest their savings, and that's into property.
Which is an awful option, by the way, because it is so punitive
completely
on landlords. So we look... People don't tune into our podcast to hear a 49-year-old man rant about his and get up on a soapbox, but it is such a hot button for me. I think it is such a tragedy. And I understand the history of Ireland is one of socialism. We were a poor country since time began up until probably late 90s. And then our economic fortunes turned, and our laws had not turned to that point. And, we all, more or less, everybody was living the same life. Some were living it in the city, some were living live in the country, but more or less everyone in the country came from modest beginnings, and I would dare to say even poor beginnings. And our laws are very much, they just never have, our tax laws never evolved. CGT is a disgrace in this country, an absolute disgrace. And this 8-year rule, it's a disgrace. And FET, which in fairness, Uncle Sam will withhold, I think it's 30% of anything over 70 grand in value if you snuff it, whether you like it or not, is another disgraceful tax law. There's a long shopping list, but I'll give you a quick story. In around 2000 and I'm going to say 16, I was invited to meet the former Minister for Finance, whose name is Michael Noonan. And I'm pausing, I'm trying to remember, he's still with us. Yeah, so Michael Noonan was the Minister for Finance, and I was invited to have breakfast to offer my thoughts on the subject of CGT, because at that time I had done a little bit of research on it, and I had an opinion on capital gains tax and how it was high enough to be stifling the flow of capital in the Irish economy. So I thought, oh, I'm an important person. I'm going to meet the Minister for Finance. So I donned my best suit and I went into Leinster House for breakfast. And I arrived at the Minister for Finance's office to be told, actually, he's out in Killiney Castle. I was like, no. And I'm opening an email and, oh, Emmett, please, you never saw anyone drive from the centre from the centre of the city out to Killiney Castle like at that hour in the morning ever. So anyway, I arrived and I felt the honour, the arrow dropped a little, because I realised I wasn't the only one invited for breakfast with Michael Noonan. The room was full. It was like a wedding.
Yeah.
So anyway,
anyway,
it's an ongoing sore point for me, and anyone who's managed to claw their way out of the ditch, because that's the Irish history. I would say anyone in Ireland here, I'd say 95% of our listeners from Ireland, their parents, they came from modest beginnings, and their grandparents from very modest beginnings. So as a nation, those who've managed to claw their way out of extreme modesty, I think it's a shame that there isn't a platform for us to preserve and grow wealth, not for personal enrichment, but it's just so punitive. There you go. I'm still in soapbox ranting.
Soapbox mode.
And I said I'm not going to rant.
Absolutely, but I completely agree. And I think, I don't know what the changes would be. I think we could be more ambitious, because there's so much to fix.
Yeah,
we'd love so much to happen right away, which might be ambitious. But
yeah,
in what it could do, it would really introduce passive investing as a viable option for Irish investors. It would take away control from like 3 big life insurance companies who control basically the entire pension landscape. And it could legitimately, it wouldn't solve the property crisis, but it alleviated in a meaningful way, I believe.
Yeah.
It's not going to undo all the problems that have been done, but it will in the future, in the maybe next generation, provide a legitimate option for people that isn't just going into property as an investment.
The Brits have a right, hopefully, with the ISA. Like if you live
time
in the UK, it's a 20 grand a year. I think it's even more. You can put a really high sum of your earnings pre-tax into a certain vehicles vis-a-vis startups and early stage companies, and get huge tax breaks. It's a brilliant system.
Yeah. So hopefully we will see something like that. So yeah, big deal if it does come about, for sure. Okay, Emmett, thank you very much for joining me, and thanks for the soapbox rant to finish the show. Remember, folks, you can sign up now at MyWallSt.com to receive a full deep dive on one of our favorite deep mode stocks. You'll also stay up to date on the latest offers, news, podcasts, and more. If you're not in it, you can't win it. So just give us your email. You'll be on our mailing list. You'll get all that good stuff. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll talk to you next week.